Good day and welcome to our online message for this week. My name's Deanne and I'm the pastor of Margarettsville, Lower Granville Baptist Churches. If you're in the area, we'd love to have you join us in person. We meet in Margarettsville at 10 a.m. and Lower Granville at 2 p.m. Well, last week we started to look at the prayer life of Abraham. And we looked briefly at two one-way interactions between Abraham and God. Do you remember? God told Abraham to go, to leave his homeland, his country, and travel to a land that he would show him. And his response was to go. No argument. Then later in his life, we read about his being called to sacrifice his son, Isaac, as a burnt offering. And once again, he is obedient. The hand is raised with the knife, and he's ready to plunge it into his son with no hesitation. But God intervenes. Abraham was obedient because he believed and trusted that God would provide a way. And he did. Abraham didn't know what that way would be. He didn't understand, but he still was obedient. Amazing, isn't it? But you know, God is still the same God today as he was back then. And he still makes a way. Today, when we step out in obedience and when we trust him in faith. We might not see it until later, in hindsight, but God is always at work. We can trust him. Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works together for good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. This week, I want us to move on, and we're going to look at chapter 18 of Genesis. And here we are looking at another type of prayer that we see Abraham offering to God. And it's a type of prayer called intercessory prayer. I imagine you're all familiar with this kind of prayer because I know this is how you pray as well. Maybe you don't use this title, intercessory, but it's just the same. So let's look at it today, shall we? The full Bible says intercession may be defined as holy, believing, persevering prayer whereby somebody pleads with God on behalf of another or others who desperately need God's intervention. Or, put another way, intercession means an arranged meeting with God to talk with him about someone else. We've all done this, right? So we can all be called intercessors, prayer warriors for others. The Bible is full of individuals who offered intercessory prayer for others. You'll remember many of them, I'm sure. Look with me at the example of Moses' prayer in Exodus. Remember back to the story where Israel had begun worshiping the golden calf at the foot of Mount Sinai, and God was angry. He had just removed Israel from the bondage of slavery in Egypt and the spiritual bondage of adultery. And in the moment of their rebellion, God was detailing his loving laws to Moses. He was giving him the 10 Commandments. So God took very personally Israel's rebellion and turning to other gods. But Moses came and he stood in the gap on behalf of the Israelites, pleading with the Lord not to destroy his people. Listen to his words in Exodus 32:11 and 14. But Moses sought the favor of the Lord his God. "O Lord," he said, "why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand?" Then the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened. Think as well of Elijah. In 1 Kings 18, we see Elijah calling out to God to reveal his power to the Israelites so that they would know that the Lord is God. Look at verse 37. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. And God responds to Elijah's prayers, his intercession. We can also look at an example in Daniel. Daniel was another man of great prayer and faith. And as he prayed, an angelic response was released. After a lot of battle in the heavenly realms, the angel made it to Daniel with an answer to his prayer. So as we step into the place of intercession, we contribute to the heavenly battle being waged over people and nations even today. Our prayers matter. When we turn to the New Testament, we see believers interceding for others. And of course, we have Jesus, his example. Jesus continually prayed for others. He prayed for children. He prayed for the sick. He prayed for his disciples. He prayed for his enemies. And he prayed for you and me. When people, or in this case, Jesus himself, intercedes for others to God, it reveals their love, their concern, their heartbreak, their desire for someone or something to change. Someone has said intercession is truly love on its knees. Isn't that beautiful? Love on its knees. The story is told of a grandmother who was a great prayer warrior, and she lived a life committed to God. She prayed persistently, especially for her granddaughter, who was not yet a believer. And when the grandmother died, it is said that her granddaughter was visibly upset, and she could be heard through her sobs saying, "Who will pray for me now?" Intercession truly is love on its knees. In our passage today, we see the love Abraham has for his nephew Lot, for the other believers of Sodom and Gomorrah. But to set the scene, Abraham and Sarah, they had come to Canaan with their nephew Lot. And Abraham felt a strong obligation to protect his nephew, as we all do with our family members. Lot had settled in Sodom, which was a very sinful city. And he had already been rescued once by Abraham. He had been taken captive to Mesopotamia, where he was serving as a slave. And Abraham went and brought him back to freedom. And now, once again, Abraham realizes Lot is in trouble again. And this time he is in trouble with the Lord himself. So what else could Abraham do than go to God in prayer? He had entertained 3 men, and it turned out that 2 were angels on their way to Sodom, and the other was God himself, appearing as an angel. And this is where our passage and our story begins today. This story is also the very first passage in the Bible where we see intercessory prayer. And what a prayer it is. You see, God decided to reveal to Abraham that he was going to judge Sodom and Gomorrah for their wickedness. And Abraham was under no illusions because he knew how bad Sodom and Gomorrah really were. And that when the Lord's angels observed the sins of the city, God would be obligated by all that was right and holy to destroy it. Abraham knew this. But upon hearing about this upcoming destruction, Abraham immediately has a concern. There's a problem. And that problem is that Lot and his family are there, and this means that they are going to be destroyed as well. So Abraham immediately acts as an intercessor on Lot and his family's behalf, and he brings his concerns to God in a series of prayers where he appeals to God's justice. Look with me at verse 22 and following. It says, "The men turned away and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, 'Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you sweep it away and not spare the place and the sake of the 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do right?'" You see, Abraham knew that God was righteous and holy, and he could be trusted to do what was right. After all, this was God's character. So Abraham knew he could trust God to treat the righteous justly. So he's very bold in his prayer, but he's also very humble. And then over the course of the next few minutes, Abraham goes from 50 to 40 righteous people. To 45 first, and then to 40, 30, 20. What if there are 10 righteous people? All the while asking for the Lord's indulgence and repeatedly acknowledging his own humble place before Almighty God. "Now that I have been so bold to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes. May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, may the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more." You see, over and over again, he presented his request before God. Oh, he was persistent. And although, God didn't grant his request, his literal request, he did grant the intent of his request. Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, but Lot and his family were spared. When you and I bring our requests to God, we honor God. We reveal the desires of our hearts, and we admit that we know only He can meet them. And in His goodness, because He is good, we know He will answer the best way. So what can we learn from Abraham's intercessory prayer today? Well, it is important to be in a relationship with God, first of all, because this will lead us to be bold and confident as we come to Him and we stand in the gap for others in need of prayer. We're to be humble. Abraham remembered that he was nothing but dust and ashes, and that God was the judge of all the earth, and He would do what was right. That God always acted in keeping with His character and His word. And we also learn from this passage and others that we must not forget to be persistent in our prayers. We are to stand in the gap for others and keep praying, keep on. Don't give up until our prayer is answered, one way or the other. Maybe you've been praying for a long time for a loved one who is lost to God. Keep praying. It's not always God, it is not God's will that any be lost. And He can answer prayer in ways that we could never imagine, all in His time. Intercession is a way of loving others. It's a way of loving our world. It's a way of standing in the gap for our family, for our friends, our neighbors, the strangers we pass in the store, even the person sitting next to you today. You and I can stand in the gap for all hurting people, for the lonely, the displaced, the sick, the homeless, the drug addicts. Let's be the one, let's be the church who stands in the gap. In Richard Foster's book on prayer, he says, if we truly love people, we will desire for them far more than it is within our power to give them. And this leads us to prayer. James 5, verse 16, the effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous person availeth much. Thank you for joining with me today. I do pray God's blessing on each of you this week, and I encourage you, be an intercessor. Pray for others. Be persistent. And trust in God for an answer. God bless you all. We'll see you next week. Take care.